In this CineGuru MAX tutorial, we're going to take a look at how to set up a simple A to B camera move. So here's our very important barrel that we want to film, and what we really want to do is create a shot that kind of moves across the scene like this, from one side of the barrel to the other. So, how do we do that? Firstly, we're going to drop in a camera marker. Let's get that pointing roughly at the barrel. And I'm not going to change any of the parameters this time, so I'll leave the film time set to 5, I'll leave the fade to 0, and I won't change the focal length. So it's a 5-second shot with no fade in at the beginning. Let's just raise that up slightly so it's not sat completely on the floor. And we'll need a way to trigger this, so again we'll go into add, and we'll add a Cine trigger zone, and just drop that in here. So when the player enters this zone, it will trigger this camera. And I'll drop a bit of sand down as well, just so we know where that is in test game. But at the moment, it's just a static camera. It doesn't move. So what we want to do is add a second element that basically instructs the camera to move over here somewhere. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a endpoint marker. So this is its own separate element. And again, we'll raise this up a little bit, get it pointing roughly at the barrel. And you can probably see already on the right that it has one editable parameter, and that's a fade. So this is a fade to black at the end of the shot. So if I were to make that 1, that would mean that in this 5-second shot, the last second, I guess when it's about here, it starts to fade to black. So I'm just going to draw a connection between our camera marker and our endpoint. And what that does, establishing that connection basically instructs the camera, okay, you're attached to an endpoint. When you're activated, move over the course of 5 seconds to this spot. And of course, it's also inheriting the orientation of that entity as well. So it's moving from its orientation and position to that of the endpoint marker. So it's going to do a nice little arcing camera move like this. So let's take a look at that in action. So we enter our zone. Obviously, we didn't add a fade up from black at the beginning, but we did add one at the end. And you can see that when we fade to black, if that's the last camera in the sequence, it does actually do a little fade up from black when control gets restored to the player. So all very straightforward, all very simple. If you now want to add another camera into the scene, so for instance, I don't know, let's create one on this side of the barrel, and we'll make this a moving camera move as well. We'll put in an endpoint, put it about here. We'll just drag both of those up a little bit so they're not completely sat on the floor. They don't look very well lined up with the barrel yet. Yeah, that's not bad. And we can again establish a bit of a connection between these two by drawing a connection from our camera marker to our endpoint marker. If we want to cut from our first camera to our second camera, all we've got to do is draw a connection from the endpoint marker of the first camera to the camera marker of the second shot. So now, when we run the cinematic, we have our A to B move, and yeah, we push in on the barrel. And there was a little sort of fade up at the beginning of that as well. So by kind of combining these in different ways, you can create some interesting effects. So obviously we pushed in on the barrel there, but we could just as easily do a sort of a rising camera move. That's another thing we could try. So let's try and get these a little bit more lined up. And the shot inherits, as I say, the position and the rotation of the marker that it's going to. So we could set this endpoint to be pointed a bit more down at our barrel, and you'll see that as the shot rises, the orientation kind of switches from looking at the barrel like this to looking at the barrel kind of like this. It's had to kind of tilt down, and it kind of works all that out. It interpolates the rotation itself. So again, we'll draw a connection from the endpoint to our third camera. So what that means is at the end of camera 2's shot, we're then going to cut to camera 3. So camera 1 again, fade to black, fade up again for camera 2. We didn't add a fade on the end of camera 2, so it's just going to cut straight to camera 3. Okay, haven't quite aligned that shot quite right. The barrel's not in the center, but that's fine. Maybe that's what you're going for. As I say, there are other ways to get cameras to look at elements in your scene. You don't have to kind of leave it to guesswork, but we will look at those in another tutorial. However, in the next tutorial, we'll be looking at how to create even more complicated camera moves with the camera following a path.